Chapter 16. Grayson shepherded me to the second floor and made a beeline for one of the rooms, throwing open the door and pushing me inside with an exhale. He stepped in after me and held out a hand.
The letter.
It took a moment for my mind to catch up, but I eventually fumbled for the folded-up parchment that I had tucked beneath the cloak before passing it over. Grayson took it, and, for the first time since we'd left the Libertas, looked me directly in the eye. The hard stare he'd worn softened, and he released a second breath, looking as though he was biting back words. I never heard what they were. Abruptly, he turned on his heel and crossed back out into the hallway, pulling the door closed behind him. The lock turned with a click. I stared at the door for several moments. Had he just locked me in? In half disbelief, I reached out and jiggled the handle, only to confirm that he had. With a scowl, I turned to look at what were apparently my new accommodations. It was more spacious than the cabin back on the ship, at least, with a double bed against the wall and a door leading to a tiny washroom on the opposite side. There was a half-used candle sitting on the bedside table, but no matches. Luckily, plenty of light still poured in from the narrow window. I collapsed onto the edge of the bed, breathing deeply to calm the storm of anxiety brewing in my stomach. The mattress was lightly filthy, but I couldn't bring myself to care. There really was no turning back now. All that was left was to wait for Father to receive the letter. A chorus of rowdy laughter rose from the floor beneath me, and I glanced at the door. After the exchange downstairs, I had a feeling that Grayson had locked it to keep others out, rather than to keep me in. Regardless, it made me uneasy to be shut up in this unfamiliar place. Was he coming back? I stared at the door for several more moments before remembering myself, and pulling my gaze away, squeezing my eyes shut. I had to stop this. He'd made it perfectly clear that he had no interest in interacting with me further since we'd kissed. And besides, he was still my captor, a person who I should very much not have been kissing in the first place. Opening my eyes to stare at the ceiling, I thought back to that moment for perhaps the 100th time since it had happened. I should have stopped him. Things would be a lot simpler if I had. He had given me ample opportunity, far more than any of Father's men did whenever they'd sloppily smacked their lips against mine. I might have expected the same rough, pushy treatment from a hardened pirate like a Grayson. But it had been anything but. He had been firm, to be sure, but gentle. I kept thinking about the way his hand had cupped the back of my neck, holding me, protecting me. A warm feeling built further between my thighs the longer I thought about it. I stood and went to the window, peering through the grime smeared all over the glass. There wasn't much to see, only the tops of houses and buildings, and the rolling sea just beyond them. A few masts poked over the horizon, most of their sails rolled up for docking. Hours slid agonizingly past, and my utter boredom drowned out my anxiety as I found myself pacing the length of the room and watching the sun inch across the sky. By mid-afternoon, I was completely restless and wondering whether or not I was going to be stuck in this room until my father responded. I had just begun daydreaming about attempting an escape out the tiny window when I heard the lock turn. I spun to see Grayson open the door, with a brown paper package in one hand. He paused on the threshold and held the package out towards me.
Here.
he grumbled. Blinking, I crossed the room to take it. It was warm, and from the scent wafting out of the paper, I discerned that a loaf of bread was concealed within. I looked up to thank him, only to find that he was already turning to leave. Without thinking, my hand shot forward to grab his wrists. "Wait!" I blurted out. He flinched at my touch, but stopped. Realizing what I had done, I pulled back and cleared my throat. "How long do I have to stay here?" I asked. Grayson sighed, looking something close to apologetic.
Could be a few weeks. Believe it or not, this is the safest place for you.
Given the nature of the clientele we had encountered so far, I did find that somewhat hard to swallow, though I supposed the rest of the town was likely more of the same or worse. Grayson tried again to make his exit, but I grabbed the door this time to stop him. "Wait," I found myself repeating. He waited, but I faltered. I didn't actually have anything to say. Seeing this, Grayson lifted a hand to his forehead, pushing a clump of hair backwards.
Everly,
he sighed, and my heart immediately started racing. Whatever else he might have said was interrupted by heavy footsteps and snickering from behind him.
I never been with no one as pretty as yourself, you see.
Glancing over his shoulder, I saw two men making their way past, one of them with a busty woman draped over his arm. Grayson tensed and quickly stepped inside, muttering something under his breath as he closed the door. "What is this place?" I asked, remembering the partially nude woman downstairs. Are we in a... I couldn't quite bring myself to say whorehouse, even though I'd heard all manner of raunchy language in the past few weeks. Old habits were hard to break. Grayson luckily caught on.
It's just an inn.
He assured me.
Though, if you'd prefer call it a pleasure house because there are whores, you'd have to do the same for every establishment in town.
The corner of his mouth twisted with disdain. I swallowed hard, resisting the urge to cast a cautious glance at the bed behind me. Suddenly, the cleanliness of the mattress seemed worthy of my concern. "So, you're going to keep me shut in here until my father writes back?" I asked, scowling. His eyebrows knitted together.
What other options do you think we have?
His condescending tone deepened my scowl, and I crossed my arms over my chest.
The captain tasked me with keeping you safe while we're here, and that's what I intend to do. Letting you wander around the free port would just be asking for trouble. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, but I don't need to be locked in. I'm not a child.
I'm not locking you in. I'm locking others out,
he argued, rolling his eyes.
Do you remember the man we met downstairs with the blonde hair?
A stupid question, I thought. How could I forget? Even Grayson seemed to reflexively grimace at the recollection.
His name is Nathaniel Redthorn. He and his crew are notorious for pillaging and raping up and down the Iberian coast, and if he got the chance, he would force himself on you without thinking twice.
Grayson's gaze was hard and unmoving as he continued.
On the Libertas, it was different. Those men were under our command, and I could order them to stay away from you. Here, I can't do that, and Nate is far from the only person we have to worry about. That's why the door is locked.
He was trying to scare me into backing down, but knowing this only made me angrier. And why do you have the key? He blinked in surprise, and his mouth opened, but his words didn't come out fast enough to cut me off. I'm not a pet for you to visit as you please. That made him flinch, and sensing the weakness, I pressed further. I'm more than aware of the dangers here, and I have no desire to subject myself to them any more than necessary. So the least you could do is not insult me by making me feel like even more of a prisoner than I already am. Grayson's expression shifted, affronted first, and then combative, and it seemed for a moment that further argument was brewing. But something made him bite his tongue. He wound up saying nothing for a moment, pressing his lips into a hard line. After some consideration, he let out a defeated sigh and began digging in his pockets.
Fine,
he grumbled.
Here.
Without warning, he grabbed my free hand and pressed a cold iron key into my palm. I blinked at it, thrown off by the concession.
But we're going to have some rules,
he said, eyebrows dipping sternly.
You're not to open this door for anyone but me. Unless you hear me knock exactly 5 times, under no circumstance will you go anywhere near that doorknob.
He paused as there was another bout of laughter from downstairs, as though reminding me what hazards laid outside the safety of this room.
And if someone else does happen to knock, you will be silent until they leave.
He had slipped into the authoritative tone I'd heard him use with the crew of the Libertas.
Do I make myself clear?
I nodded, stifling the scowl that threatened to mar my face at being ordered around. Grayson's shoulders relaxed, but his expression remained uneasy.
Good.
He looked me squarely in the eyes.
You and I will be seeing quite a lot of each other over the next several days. The rest of the crew will likely bounce from whorehouse to whorehouse while we're here, so, like it or not, I'm your only ally. You should keep that in mind.
I furrowed my brow, but he didn't give me the chance to ask what that was supposed to mean before he whirled on his heel, finally making his exit. I stared at the empty space where he'd stood for several moments, before locking the door with my newly acquired key, then dropping it on the bedside table. A small triumph, at least. A part of me wondered if Grayson was behaving this way now purely to infuriate me, if it was all part of some convoluted game he was playing, to see how far he could push me before I finally snapped. But I couldn't convince myself of it. Something more was going on in that head of his every time we spoke. That much I could tell. But the man was so difficult to read that I couldn't begin to fathom what it might be, constantly shifting back and forth, like a full moon tide, and keeping me guessing as to what he might do next. I picked at my fingernails for a few moments. Perhaps I was overthinking. After all, what was the use in agonizing? This ordeal was nearly finished, and however it ended, I wouldn't have to see his frustratingly attractive face ever again. For some reason, this didn't make me feel any better. Thus was I left to my own devices for the majority of the days that followed, interrupted 2 or 3 times daily by Grayson when he came to bring me food and water. As promised, each visit was announced by exactly 5 knocks on the door. No more and no fewer, delivered in a deliberate, steady rhythm. He never said much and didn't stay long. I was lucky to wring a hello or a good morning out of him. It was a few days after our arrival, sometime in the early evening, when I heard shouting in the hallway just outside. This was not unusual, but normally it came from downstairs, and I glanced at the door curiously. It was a woman's voice, with such a thick Cockney accent that I could scarcely comprehend her words, though they seemed to be mostly profanities. The tirade was abruptly cut short by the sound of a loud crack, a shriek immediately following. Instinctively I jumped up. The swearing did not resume. I hesitated a moment at the door, weighing my options, but I couldn't help myself. I carefully cracked it open to peer into the hallway. I caught the back of a man stalking away, while a woman in a low-cut dress slowly pushed herself up from the dusty wooden floorboards.
Stinking bastard!
I heard her mutter as she brushed out the folds of her dress. I glanced in both directions. The hallway was otherwise empty, and so I deemed it safe to open the door further and take a ginger step out. "Are you all right?" I asked. The woman looked at me in mild surprise, and then glared after her assailant.
Fine. Shite shortchanged me's all.
She spat in his general direction. I noticed a bruise forming on her cheek, but it looked as though she'd already shaken off the encounter. A pit took shape in my stomach at the realization that she was probably used to such treatment. She faced me, tilting her head as she looked me up and down. She was undoubtedly attractive, on the thicker side, but that only lent more to the large breasts that threatened to pop out of her dress. Her bright red hair had been curled, and may have been pinned up at some point, but now hung loose and in tangles around her shoulders. She pursed a pair of painted lips at me.
Never seen you round before. You a boat girl?
I blinked. I beg your pardon? At this, the girl exploded into laughter.
Don't need to beg me for nothing, sweetheart.
When she smiled, I saw that a few of her teeth were missing, but it was somehow endearing.
They were saying Grayson showed up here with a pretty thing on his arm. Suppose it was you?
I bristled. I'm not. I stopped myself, remembering that this was the lie that Grayson had given Nathaniel downstairs. Embarrassing as it was, having her think that I was Grayson's personal prostitute, or something of the sort, was better than her knowing the truth. The girl paid the hesitation no mind, and offered me a sloppy curtsy.
Name's Johanna. You?
I had at least enough sense left to not give my true name, and instead said the first one that came to mind. I'm Penny, I told her, remembering poor Penny Haywood, who had been denied passage aboard the Oasis, which seemed like so long ago. I wondered if she knew now how lucky she'd been. I chewed my lip. It had been days since I'd so much as spoken to another human being, and I quickly convinced myself that staving off more torturous boredom was worth disobeying Grayson for just a few moments more. You know Grayson? I asked.
Everyone does. All the girls do, at least. Plus, everyone's been talking about how he mouthed off Nate Redthorn the other day.
All the girls know him. I found myself immediately wanting to ask what that meant, but refrained. Johanna let out a huff, scowling down the stairs.
Back to work for me, then. See you around, Penny.
Much to my horror, she marched right back into the den of inebriated pirates below. I wondered how many more of them would strike her like that tonight. I almost wanted to stop her, to invite her into the room to talk, enjoy someone other than Grayson's company for once. But I had already pushed the envelope just by opening my door, and that would have been a step too far. With a sigh, I retreated to wait in solitude until the next 5 knocks.